thank you everyone for joining our panel discussion about data leaks. I'm Greg Pollock, the VP of Cyber Research at UpGuard, and as we talked about before, our focus on data leaks is one of the things that makes our research unique. And whenever I talk about it, I like to first start by clarifying what we mean by a data leak. So essentially, a data leak or a data exposure is when data of some sensitivity is made publicly available. It's typically a mistake, like a misconfiguration, or someone misunderstands the privacy settings of a product they're using. It's usually done by someone who does not have malintent. In that way, data leaks are different from the threat model we talk about when we're thinking about a malicious actor trying to break into your system to take your data. It also means that because the data has already been made public, our team is able to search for it and help secure it before our malicious actors do. This is useful just to distinguish what we talk about when we talk about data leaks. So I say all this mostly to underscore that data leaks are a natural symptom of large-scale digitization. They occur for every company at some time or another. Most companies don't like admitting they happen and will avoid discussing it. But today, however, I'm joined by a few people brave enough to talk with us about data leaks and hopefully make the world a little bit safer for everyone else. With that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists and then go around and have them say a little bit more about themselves. So we have Sandy Taylor from the University of Southern California, Upul de Silva with the New South Wales Cyber Defense Portfolio, specifically for the transport section, and Chris Vickery, Mr. Data Leaks himself, the Director of Cyber Risk Research at UpGuard. Sandy, do you want to say a little bit more about what you do at USC?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with USC a little over 3 years. I oversee the Governance, Risk, and Compliance program for information security. I've stood it from the ground up, and data leaks has been a key tool that BreachSight has been a key tool that we've used over the last few years.
Cool. And Upul, do you want to tell us more about what you do with Transport New South Wales?
Yeah, I joined Transport Cyber Defense Portfolio a couple of years ago, and I was responsible in implementing UpGuard, and data leaks module is playing a key role because our organization collect and store a lot of personal data of our employees, customers, also sensitive information of our vendors and service providers. So preventing sensitive information from being leaked to unauthorized parties is one of the most pressing security concerns. Yeah, so that's where the data leaks module has helped us in shaping what we want to do in the future.
Yeah, cool. And Chris, I know you very well. Would you like to, you're also muted just so you know, but yeah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am the Director of Risk Research here at UpGuard. I like to think of the work that I have done as being a kind of a whip that has driven the industry to understand that it's not just the malicious bad guy hackers out there, that most data breaches, data exposures, data leaks, all that stuff comes from unintentionally internal or staff mistakes, and it's ever present in every industry. People just need to accept it as a thing. It's kind of like teaching a kid about going to the bathroom. Everybody does it. It happens. We got to deal with it. And the sooner we wise up and deal with it maturely, the better it is for everybody.
Cool. Yeah, that's that leads into the first question I wanted to ask you all, partially out of, I think, my curiosity, and I think other people will be curious as well. Data leaks are kind of a newish problem. It's not really an established field. There's not a sort of standard tool set for it. It's something that I learned about from Chris. I mean, following him on Twitter years ago when he was less well known. Now he's kind of a public figure. But yeah, Chris's work really is what sort of opened my eyes to how big of a problem it is and how big of a problem it can be. I wanted to ask you all, when did you start becoming aware of data leaks as a problem? And what is your sort of, I guess, like learning curve been like for that?
So I'll start. I came from private industry, and so when you are in a private corporation or a publicly traded corporation, there's a bit of a mothership and thou shalt protect data attitude and try to keep things in the confines of the corporation, which obviously still things happen. going into an academic environment where you have you have hospitals, you have regulated research, you have confidential student data, you have a credit union. We're a city within a city. And at any given time, we have 65,000 people who could cause data to be where it should not be. And so trying to think about that in a different what manner was how I discovered that data leaks type solution, or looking at it from the inside out, how data can get out, would be a path to try to reduce risk.
Yeah. So in our case, preventing sensitive information from being leaked to unauthorized parties is one of the most pressing concerns for us for some time now. Mm-hmm. So we have deployed a number of vulnerability scanning tools. However, the challenge is to get timely visibility when our data is exposed on the internet. So this is where we found UpGuard's data leak feature to be very effective, as it determines whether what has been found poses a risk to transport to our customers and alerts us at the earliest opportunity. So that's why we thought it's a very useful tool, and also the two-pass vetting process where it's initially managed by a system algorithm and business rules, and then it's referred to a human analyst to verify before it's referred to us for further investigation. So that way, you cut down the number of false positives, so we can only focus on genuine breaches.
Yeah, that was one of the things I remember talking with Chris about when we started doing this was the sheer number of things that Chris reviews. And Chris has found many, many huge exposures before UpGuard and with UpGuard. But yeah, the sheer number of like open buckets or whatever type of resource to look through to find the significant ones. But yeah, Chris, I think you've told me before about when you started getting into data leaks research. I think that's really interesting because it in some ways is like very early in the maturity of this. Can you talk about when you first started being aware of data leaks too?
Yeah, of course, always being interested in tech, the idea of a large exposure of data has always been kind of a model of a nightmare scenario. But it was probably around early 2015 that the law firm I was working for at the time, I was doing tech help desk type stuff back then. The law firm had clients that were suffering from data breaches, and they were looking for somebody that could translate the tech concept into a legal language framework and give them some sort of guidance on how do we approach this, what is the right way to look at it. And my somewhat minimal background in paralegalism, combined with my tech skills at the time, led to a natural role that I played trying to translate this. And it kind of bit me. I got kind of a fever as far as data breaches go of, okay, is this really as big a deal as it seems to be? I'm going to dig into this more and more. And on my free time, because I was a nerd and I still am, I spent an exorbitant amount of time looking into, okay, not related to the law firm clients, just in general, what is out there and available. And I started finding things like, 1.2 million social security numbers from the state of Kansas and California and Utah, having to do with the employee disability state-run program. And this was like within the first day of me seriously looking for things. And I thought, if a lowly guy like me at the time, years ago, can come across something so huge and obviously bad, how about the professional bad guys that are in groups doing this as a coordinated effort? What are they coming across? What are they doing about it? And it occurred to me that, hey, we got to start ringing alarm bells. This is too big a problem for society to continue denying.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question is, so we're here because we, I think all have quite a bit of knowledge about data leaks at this point. I wanted to ask about your peers and other people that you may work with professionally or, otherwise talk to. Do you think the InfoSec community or your peer group in, governance, whatever, do you see it becoming a more acknowledged problem? Do you see people, understanding what you're talking about and not having to explain it as much to them?
Absolutely. The government agencies and public and private organizations are well aware of this issue now. organizations' maturity level of cybersecurity is a key consideration these days for B2B engagements. And organizations are required to demonstrate that necessary controls are in place in order to become business partners.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of government agencies here, this is more formalized under the auspices of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, ACSC. It provides advice and guidance which include policies, strategies, and resources that organizations can use to protect their information and systems from cyber threats. So yeah, the community is well aware, and this is a forum to share information and view details of recent alerts and threats hosted by the Australian Signals Directorate. Yep.
I'd add too that especially in higher ed and education, where I think it generally is behind in a lot of the later technologies, and it can be an unwielding beast to try to tackle all the things of securing and protecting critical assets and critical data sets, all while we have to allow academic freedom. And there's a lot of data sharing already occurring. Mm-hmm. But what's been really great is that what we've been able to demonstrate with the data leaks in particular is that it's very agile and nimble. So USC has been in the news over the last few years for some pretty not so great things, if you will. And at any given time, we recognize that threat actors may play on that, and people may want to try to sell that data for the latest story. So we've been able to work with the team at UpGuard to tinker with some of our keywords and look for very specific things to see if it goes out, if it is out there. We had, like a lot of higher eds, we had a lot of trouble with Zoom bombing in the very beginning of the pandemic, and we're able to actually monitor for USC's publicly facing Zoom links, and it helped us immensely. And we shared that with other institutions on how we were trying to stay ahead of it. So I think we at least have seen some interest across other higher ed, but even just within USC, people understanding how we're trying to stay ahead of the 65,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah, Sandy, I'm so interested in how you do that and the particular challenges you face. Actually, one of our analysts was an admin at a small college, and yet talked about just how challenging it can be with all the different not only how many people there are, but the different types of entities, students, research professors, like you said, hospitals that may or may not be like co-located.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you deal with it? I'm so interested in the problem you have.
It's it's one of those things that I think you have to manage your own anxiety and worry as a security professional at any given time, because there is data everywhere, and it's in everyone's homes. And so trying to recognize that we can't secure to the ends of the earth. And so we try to look for, some of the tried and true things, like, please, higher ed people, patch your servers, which is that's difficult in any org. Looking at access, all the typical bread and butter security type things, but then using tools like data leaks, or our security operations team and our IAM teams use and I'm probably going to botch the name, but they use where like USC emails have been exposed in various breaches. They're using that in the UpGuard platform to try to notify large populations across USC, because we suffer from people doing credential stuffing and trying to reuse passphrases or passwords. So we try to use some of those outward facing tools that can help enable us to make it a little bit better, but also still as low friction as possible. It's not easy, but it's fun. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, I think one thing, so I interact with you all, but then also all of our other customers, and we also see over time how many leaks we can detect before, and then monitoring them continuously. There's some decline, which I think indicates improvements in processes as people are more aware of things. But I don't get very much visibility into what is happening in those organizations. I wanted to ask how knowing about data leaks has affected your training or awareness, or what other interactions with other organizations or entities. How's it affected your interactions and awareness programs?
So we've used, in a lot of cases, for us, it's usually a GitHub repository That is the most common notification we get. We have some that are outside of that, obviously. And so we've used that in helping our development teams understand what they're putting out there, and create some training around that. But the biggest one for us is around student workers, because oftentimes they do get access to various data types or data sets. They get access to various systems, and they may be doing a project in engineering and compile everything and put it up, and before you know it, it's in a public GitHub repository. So trying to work with some process and procedure currently around the student workers so that we can create some awareness there. Historically, it's really been staff focused on not so much the faculty and the students. And so that's what we're broadening actually in this next year.
Cool.
Yeah, so in our case, we have rolled out a number of initiatives to prevent or minimize data breaches over the past couple of years. We have implemented a more secure and robust standing operating environment across the transport cluster, and remediated legacy applications and non-compliant, non-standard applications before migrating them into the new platform. We have enforced multi-factor authentication, and we discourage our staff members subscribing to non-transport domains or website using their work email. And in relation to third parties and vendors, we now ensure their commitment to cybersecurity when we engage them. So these are some of the measures we have taken.
Paul just said something actually that, if I may, Greg, that has been a particular struggle for us, and I don't know if this is the case with other orgs. So there's been some alerts that we'll get that are other companies who have our data in their publicly visible files, and it's not necessarily confidential, because I think that's an easier hit, but it'll be something where it's like, well, that's not great, and we'll try to reach out. But because we deal with nonprofits and we deal with some of these one-offs where they are third and fourth parties, that is an area where we actually currently, I think, have some difficulty in getting action.
That's interesting. I was going to ask how third party or fourth party relations have played into your usage of data leaks, and I guess whether it's giving you additional visibility into that. Because we in the analyst side, then we do often see, well, this is a vendor that our customer didn't even tell us that they're using this vendor, and yet we're sort of highlighting this vendor relationship. And I guess you guys have all spoken to it to some extent, but I was going to ask how third-party relationships play into how you think about data leaks.
Yeah, so in our case, we use strict vetting criteria when onboarding vendors and third-party service providers. Our cybersecurity team is currently reviewing onboarding material, including questionnaires, to ensure that they meet or complies with vendor engagement and attestation criteria. And also, after we implemented the data leaks, we have protocols in place to configure keywords in relation to vendors, their brands, and service details in UpGuard, so we get insights to the data leak occur.
Chris, sorry, your computer was going nuts for a minute. I was going to ask, do you have any thoughts on sort of the education component? So, we largely work in detection, but it's great to, provide some education up front about how to prevent them. So I was going to ask your thoughts on that.
Well, I was asked that question starting, years ago when I started this research, and the consistent answer that I've given to people is, just as a baseline, this would probably cut down about, 70, 80% of the types of data breaches that I find. If you're not going to go with a whole awesome service like UpGuard, then at the very minimum, once a month, send one of your, outside of pandemic times, send one of your IT workers home at noon, or give them a day off, and just give them a task of trying to access whatever important services you have without logging in. Just tell them to, at their home computer, try to access your critical server, database, Slack channels, whatever the heck, without authentication. And if every major organization, company, entity out there did that just once a month, they would catch 70, 80% of the stuff that I come across in my type of research, because that's really what it is. It's just companies that assume things are password protected when they're not.
to what Chris was saying, he just made me think of something. We struggle too, where at least in our world, where people don't really understand the classification of the type of data that they're putting out there. And so, and again, it's usually that internal use kind of murky middle, if you will, where it's not necessarily confidential, but why help somebody out by putting it out there? And like we found, this is one that I can talk about, that we have an employee website at USC that's open to the world. And there's these documents behind the scenes that are open to the world that have like our plan number. And it's like, well, it's not confidential, but why put that out there? Why make it that much easier? And I get it, they're trying to share the information, but that's one of the areas where we're trying to educate people a bit more, that there are unfortunately people out there that will take advantage of that information.
Yeah, it's kind of like, and I hate to quote him, but the old Rumsfeld line about the unknown unknowns and the known unknowns. This is an actual application of that, where you can't necessarily think about all the combinations of logical social engineering that a bad guy can. And so there's no reason to give them the ammunition that they can then use to toss in their machine of criminality and then use against you. Just minimize what you put out there and cut off the unknown unknowns.
Agreed.
Cool. I guess we're getting pretty close to time. The last thing I wanted to ask about, and again, this is just my my curiosity, is I wanted to ask about your remote working or remote education trajectory over the last year. Because actually, I think, Sandy, the last time we talked, I think it was close to the beginning of quarantine in California. And yeah, I mean, the tool shift has been immense, I know, for us and for everyone. And like you said, the migration to Zoom is one thing. I was so curious about how you all have adapted to remote work, and then what challenges you found, and then how you've compensated for those in terms of your security plans.
Well, I'll go first. Aside from the initial terror, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, similar problems we had on campus, and thankfully at the time USC was very much so an on-campus type place. Now with data everywhere in the world of USC's and people's laptops and systems, we obviously have done the ramping up education, ramping up endpoint protections and whatnot. But also that's where, as I mentioned, we've utilized data lakes to monitor for those public facing Zoom links, because we were experiencing Zoom bombing. Also looking for, because it's so many people, there's a given time where a adjunct professor may use their personal Dropbox, and they may put their student data files there. They may do those types of things. And this is where a service like Data Lakes really helps us, because we don't have an army of people on staff to look and hunt for those things. So it's really helped us in this time where we're all home and we know data is proliferated even further, help us try to keep things somewhat in check.
Makes sense. And you, Upul?
Yeah, so in our case, when remote working was introduced, I think around the second quarter in 2020, we already had some initiatives being implemented. But at the same time, we had to fast track some activities to ensure sufficient protection was there to safeguard our infrastructure, and at the same time enable staff to carry out their work remotely. So some of the things that we did was, as I mentioned, we rolled out the new standard operating environment, enabling multi-factor authentication. So no matter from where they log in, there are controls in place. We disabled the legacy authentication on their mobile devices, like mobile phones, tablets, etc. And we have other initiatives like application controls and patching, which we do regularly now, web browser hardening, and also we carry out user access reviews and privilege access management on a regular basis. So minimize data leaks and unnecessary exposure.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to run over because I think there's a great panel starting next with Tulin about third-party risk management. So yeah, I just want to say thank you all. I really enjoyed seeing you and talking to you about this. And yeah, I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it as well.
Thanks.